Glutamate is harmless, but why is it then that we always get told that we should avoid it? Because, yeah, that's a really weird story actually. Grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, we'll dive right in. Let's start, as always, with the basics. What is glutamate? This is glutamate, a colorless salt that is used for cooking. In the pure form, it doesn't really taste like much. A little bit hearty, maybe like fake chicken broth. But first things first. Glutamate is the salt of glutamic acid, one of the 20 canonical amino acids that build up all of our proteins. Glutamic acid, or rather glutamate, exists naturally in a lot of food and is also produced by our body. I guess this means for man-eating animals and cannibals, we also count as glutamate-containing food. Glutamate was isolated in this pure form for the first time in 1908 from the Japanese chemist Kikunae Ikeda from algae. He was looking for a special taste. During his research stay in Leipzig, that's in Germany, Ikeda found that in some foods, tomato, asparagus, cheese, meat, there is a peculiar but common taste. Peculiar taste in German food. Are you sure that's correct? Anyways, Ikeda didn't find this peculiar taste only in certain German foods, but also in Japan, for example in dashi. That's a family of stocks, very common in the Japanese cuisine, made from konbu algae, which forms, for example, the base for miso. This characteristic hearty taste, that's for example in parmesan, meat, dried tomatoes or dashi, is called umami. Umami is, next to sweet, salty, sour and bitter, the fifth basic taste and can be translated from Japanese as pleasant, savory taste. Quick side note, I mean the 5 specific tastes received by taste receptors on our tongue. There are of course a multitude of other aromas and sensations, however, those are mainly received through our nose and the somatosensory system. Back to umami. Wikipedia describes it as meaty, savory, broth-like. Because umami is more difficult to describe or identify than other tastes, it was unsure for a long time if it should actually be classified as a basic taste. And even though this is used and taught widely now, this classification is still often discussed. For no reason, as there are indeed umami receptors sitting on your tongue. Some substances, aspartate, inosinate, guanylate and glutamate, activate those umami receptors in the same way that salt activates our salty receptors or sucrose activates our sweet receptors on the tongue. However, the pure umami taste is in comparison to salty or sweet surprisingly mild. Only in combination with other flavors does umami have a flavor-enhancing effect. In this study, researchers gave participants a glutamate inosinate solution to drink, so basically water with pure umami taste, and let them sniff on vegetable flavors at the same time. The umami taste or vegetable flavor alone were rated as not so great. In combination, however, an increased taste experience was reported. And something similar could even be detected in MRI scans. The brain activity was stronger with the combination of umami drink and veggie flavor than the sum of the 2 individual effects. Speaking of brain, glutamate is also a neurotransmitter, so similar to adenosine, which you've already met in my coffee video, a molecule that brain cells use to communicate. Side note for everyone that's now worried that digested glutamate can mess up your neurochemistry. Glutamate that we take in through food can't actually get into our brain. The reason for that is the so-called blood-brain barrier, basically a roadblock between our central nervous system and our bloodstream that only lets certain substances through. Paul Ehrlich showed in 1885 that blue dye injected in dead animals colored the whole body blue except the brain. One of his students later on demonstrated the exact opposite, that dyeing the brains of dead animals blue doesn't lead to coloring of the whole body. This means glutamate is not harmful, but instead a substance that is very familiar to the body. But could it be similar to sugar or salt, where the dose makes the poison? It could be, but we'll look at that specifically in a moment. Back to Ikeda. He launched glutamate in the market in 1909 in form of its sodium salt. Sodium glutamate. To be exact, monosodium glutamate, or in short, MSG. MSG brought the poor umami taste in the spice racks of many homes. Side note, At about the same time, the Swiss entrepreneur Julius Maggi launched his nowadays famous stock powders and stock cubes on the European market. By the way, if you look into the name Maggi, you will find two pronunciations. It seems Maggi originates from Italy and could be, or should be, pronounced Maggi. Sorry for the side note inception, but I didn't want to deprive anyone of this useless trivia knowledge. Maggi, however, did not know at the time that this particular something in veggie or chicken broth is in fact umami taste, which forms through the ingredients which naturally contain glutamate, among other things. Instead of using things like yeast extract or glutamate-containing vegetables like celery, onion or carrots, you can just add a bit of pure glutamate, like it is done in the well-known and loved Maggi sauce bottle. What? Our beloved Maggi sauce contains glutamate? You can save yourself the drama, everyone saw the video title. Ah yes, true. The weird story about fear of MSG. Well, it all started with a letter to the editor of a medical journal, which maybe was only meant as a troll post. Let's see. The renowned New England Journal of Medicine, in which first and foremost medical studies are published, printed this letter to the editor in 1968. A Chinese-American doctor named Robert Holman Kwok describes how every time after a visit to a Chinese restaurant, he discovers certain symptoms. Numbness in the neck, which radiates towards his arms and back, overall weakness, tiredness, and palpitations. He speculates about possible causes, one of them being glutamate, and if his colleagues wouldn't be interested in looking into it, he would be willing to participate. The whole thing was titled Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. Several doctors answered with their own letters to the editor, describing how they had similar experiences, that they had certain symptoms after visiting Chinese restaurants, and soon enough, even the New York Times wrote about the Chinese restaurant syndrome that medics seemingly discovered. What followed was a row of scientific studies which led to different apprehensions towards glutamate. Headaches, stomach aches, nausea, obesity, risk for Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, and many, many more. But many of these scientific studies were in fact animal studies where glutamate was injected in high doses directly into the stomach. This has nothing to do with the way we use glutamate while cooking in the kitchen. The only thing you can say for sure as a result from this study is please don't inject yourself with high concentrated MSG. Or there were studies with humans, but they were methodically useless. For example, because participants were just questioned about their symptoms. Do you have Chinese restaurant syndrome? Yes? Science! Or studies that were not double-blinded, so the participants knew that they were going to eat MSG. And I should eat this now. Yes. When participants in human trials know that they're ingesting potentially harmful substances, it can easily come to a nocebo effect. Nocebo is the little negative sister of placebo, where a negative outcome occurs due to the belief that something might cause harm. Basically, the expectation of side effects causes side effects. But when over time methodically good studies piled up, in which a test group got a glutamate pill and a control group got a placebo pill, no noteworthy effects showed up. And even studies with humans who reported a glutamate intolerance showed mixed and often not reproducible results. I've linked more details to studies for you to check out in the video description below and on my website. But in short, fear of MSG, particularly in the amounts used as taste enhancer, is unsubstantiated. Hold on. Does this mean some people actively avoid glutamate because some medics in 1968 exchanged anecdotes about stomach aches? Yes, you could say it that way. But, my science friends, that's not even the end of it. It seems it's not even sure that Robert Holman Kwok actually existed. Look, as I said before, the New England Journal of Medicine is a renowned journal. But this correspondence board where the letters to the editor got printed was at that time, almost like a Reddit board for medics. A lot of stuff published there was written with a tongue-in-cheek. Apparently there was almost something like a tradition to make up fake symptoms or hyperbolize, exaggerate them, to then later on amuse yourselves about that with your other medical friends. Yeah, don't ask me folks. Medical humor in the 60s? But now, to tip it all off, if you dig deep enough, you find articles like this one, for example, that report that Dr. Holman Kwok was only invented and that Dr. Howard Steele is behind it all. According to Steele, he wrote that letter as a joke and assumed it was clear to everyone that it was supposed to be one of those funny contributions. The name home and kwok was apparently supposed to be a pun on the word human crock, which allegedly is short for human crock of shit, which means something along the lines of piece of shit. Well, anyways, it was supposed to be obvious that it's all a joke. You even find response letters that recognize the pun and spin it further. However, there is to say, if this is fake or not, I'm not really sure either. It's all based on Howard Steele's statements. Apart from that, there is no further evidence in hindsight. On top of that, he claims that he not only invented the name home and kwok, but also the institute, the National Biomedical Research Foundation, Silver Spring, Maryland. Says it doesn't actually exist. Well, he says so. However, there is this textbook about proteins and oh look, National Biomedical Research Foundation in Silver Spring, Maryland. Friends, I told you it's a weird story. But if real or fake, it doesn't matter. Those letters were definitely no professional exchange based on scientific evidence. Frankly, it was just trolling around. But from the outside, it was seen as correspondence between medical professionals, of course. Media reports like that from the New York Times quickly found open ears, particularly in anti-Asian racism. Chinese food was, for example, often presented as unclean or disgusting anyway. Yuck, they eat bats and dogs. Yeah, but then driving at Macca's. Never mind. Some of those medics who started the whole debacle were certainly not freed from these biases and prejudice. And when then the results of those questionable glutamate studies spread, the fear of MSG was eventually established. And what happens then? Exactly. Food manufacturers and restaurants started advertising with no MSG or glutamate free, and what customers think is obvious. Glutamate has to be bad, otherwise they wouldn't advertise this. Sounds familiar? Although in some cases, MSG could not only be not bad, but maybe even good. The potential of glutamate. Look, it's not about shuffling grams and grams of MSG down your throat, but rather using it like you would use other herbs and spices, like salt or sugar. Sugar is, in my opinion, a very important spice for savory food, also in the Asian cuisine. However, there is a suspicion, which is currently studied further, that glutamate can be linked to obesity. The thoughts behind this can be broken down to, if I particularly like the taste of something, and glutamate makes food taste more appealing, then I often eat more of it than I actually should, which could also be a possible explanation for the stomach ache after eating. MSG is often used in fast food, ready meals, or unhealthy snacks like crisps, which means there is some truth to the rule of thumb, avoid MSG, eat healthier. But it's not the fault of the MSG itself, but rather the food to which glutamate is added. However, since glutamate can also make fresh vegetables tastier, it might be a great help to eat more veggies. Similarly with vegan meat substitutes, umami substances like glutamate, yeast extract or something similar are essential for the umami meaty, savory taste. Some people would maybe love to eat less meat, but struggle with it because they love the taste of meat so much. From that point of view, we should be thankful for umami food sciences, making meat substitutes better and better, and therefore maybe make it easier to eat less meat. Umami against climate crisis! I am vegan personally, but I haven't cooked much with MSG. I might try that soon. Maybe I should open an Insta account so you can follow me live in the kitchen. Let me know if you would follow me on other social media accounts and how much you would want to watch me do live MSG kitchen science in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you back here on YouTube in 2 weeks, and until then, stay sciencey.